Namaste and welcome to Detours with me, Anuradha Goyal, where I talk to some very interesting personalities about journeys of all kinds. Today we have with us Neeraj Doshi ji. He is a founder of a very interesting initiative in Jaipur called Heritage Water Walks. I have always said that if India has to bring back its culture, it has to bring back its culture of water, of respecting water, of not really selling water, but really revering water, because that's the base of our life. Without water, none of us could be alive. So, who better than Neeraj to tell us the story of our relationship with water in India? And more importantly, he's based out of Jaipur, one of the driest states, but also one of the most evolved states when it comes to conservation and storage of water. So, Neeraj, welcome to Detours.
Thank you, Anuradha, for having me on Detours. And I'm glad to be connecting to the audiences across the world, whoever is listening, to share the story of water in Rajasthan and what makes this very unique. Actually, that is the whole idea which prompted me to start these heritage water walks to share the water wisdom of Rajasthan.
Okay, so let's start by talking about water and Rajasthan. You know, what is the relationship of water with Rajasthan? Because we find such beautiful examples of storing and conserving water across the state.
Right. To begin with, we cannot survive without water, right?
Right.
And Rajasthan does not have it.
Right.
The relationship is pretty intense to come to it. And the fact that it is inhabited is quite I would say, the first wonder of the world. Leave out the rest six. Because you cannot survive without water. And Rajasthan has a very unique status in that there are 25 deserts in the world.
Right.
And Rajasthan is not big. The Thar desert that we have, 70% of Rajasthan is Thar desert. The part of the Thar is also in Pakistan, known as Thar.
Right.
And so Rajasthan, the Thar desert is 200,000 square miles. And there are 25 deserts, as I said. The first or the biggest desert in the world is in Africa, which is Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
And Sahara, the area is 900 square miles, 900 million square miles. Now, what sets Thar apart from all the deserts or all the drier places in the world, which are not inhabitable naturally, is the people living inside the desert.
Mm.
Now, Thar has a population density of 1 person per square mile.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to that, Thar has 143 person per square mile, which is 143 times people living in the desert. Just to give you a contrast, the state of Arizona in the US has 63 people per square mile living in it.
Okay.
And Rajasthan has 143, which is huge, which is unimaginable if we look back as our past as more kind of evolving and not evolved or not sophisticated. But people in Rajasthan were pretty sophisticated. They are pretty sophisticated as of now. Is that we have changed the course over a period of time. But the way life evolved in Rajasthan, everything has to be connected to water. And everything is connected to the water. So if you look a little bit deep into the water, or if you sift through the layers of our culture over here, eventually you will see the core of it is water.
Right. In fact, the fact that so many people are able to inhabit a desert must have come from the fact that they could manage water.
Yeah, absolutely. They could manage water, and management is one aspect, but
right.
Management coming from your life is another thing, where you don't feel like you're making an effort, right? For instance, what we say over here is that, everybody chipping in, right, will make the well. Right. So what happens is that you don't go out of your way to do your water work. You have evolved your life around it, that every simple task of managing water puts into a custom or tradition. So you have your customs and traditions, right? And as you're doing it, the water is conserved, water is stored, or water is always there. So, for example, if anybody, if if in a society, if in a village or a city or a town, there is a death or a marriage or a childbirth or any happy or sad occasion, what they will do, they will say, I will make a water body in name of my deceased father or mother. I will make a water body in name of my newly son or grandson. So there is no hard work or extra work.
Yes.
So when you live like this, it doesn't become an effort and it becomes a beautiful thing. For instance, I mean, I can keep quoting many examples out of my life, my living life as well. That I mean, I'm fairly young, but even I have experienced that part of culture, wherein my grandmother would say, when we would visit our ancestral place, that everybody or all the grandsons and grandchild of her would get half a bucket of water for bathing.
Right.
And she would not say that you won't get more. She would say, if you want more, you can fetch it yourself. I will not do, or no one else will do in the home will do the hard work for you. Right. So if you want to use a bucket or more, go to the well or go to the nearest water facility and get it to yourself, bring it yourself. Now, this was a very hard lesson, and to me, I never felt that there is a water scarcity.
Right.
Because we never found water lacking wherever we wanted it.
Right. What you say is very beautiful. In fact, I'm reading Devi Bhagavad Puran, and in one of the punyas or the merits that it talks about, the biggest ones come from building water bodies. Yeah. And in fact, I mean, I read it and I was like, I could connect it to this whole water philosophy of India. But then it said a bigger merit or the bada punya comes from maintaining the existing water bodies. So yes. You not just have to build them, you have to maintain them also.
Exactly. And depending on that, in fact, there is an event that happened in Mahabharata, which is known, the Mahabharata, as you know, is 18-day war. And there are 18 books to Mahabharata. And the 13th book is Anushasan Parva, book of precepts, right? And this whole basically records the conversation that Bhishma Pitamaha on his deathbed had with Yudhishthira.
Right.
Pitamaha was the caretaker of the kingdom. He was heading out, and Yudhishthira, after winning the war, was joining in. He was going to assume the throne. So before he assumes the throne, Bhishma Pitamaha transferred his entire wisdom to the coming king.
Right.
And there is this conversation which is known as Anushasan Parva. During this conversation, Yudhishthira asked a question to Bhishma that what is the best deed? The best of all. Many deeds depending, it's a very subjective question, right?
Right.
But one deed that trumps all subjectiveness is giving water to the thirsty.
Absolutely.
It's a human being or a tree or an animal.
Right.
And by doing that, you can bypass 60,000 births. Now, according to our philosophy, life is an ephemeral stream. You leave one body, you assume another body until you don't come back or you become good or prophet or Jesus, whatever. Right?
Right.
So, by just doing this mere act of offering water to a thirsty, you can bypass 60,000 lives of misery, because we assume that life is a misery. Right?
Right.
So you bypass that.
Right. And also, that brings me to this culture of piyaus, this public ghadas that we keep, especially during summer months. And I remember I see a contrast when I go traveling around in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, in Uttar Pradesh. I see these, women sitting with 2 ghadas and giving water to everybody. They don't ask who you are, where you are coming from. They just, you are thirsty, take water. I'm happy to take water, and they do it with a attitude of gratitude.
Exactly.
Right. And then I take my flight. I go to the airport to take my flight, and at the airport, you have a 50 rupee price tag at a 200 ml, 500 ml bottle. And you just see the contrast, where somebody is serving you water and still feeling gratitude towards you. And here people are not even willing to give you a sip of water unless you pay. And I have always said that whenever India comes back to its past glory, it will be when we start respecting water and we stop selling water. But coming back to coming back to Rajasthan, So can you walk us through some of the, conservation technologies or water bodies and the whole engineering around it and the different types of water bodies that are there?
There are many what you call architecturally distinct water bodies. There are water bodies which are similar, but they have different names depending to the region we are in. So the Rajasthan can be divided into 4 regions: Shekhawati, Marwar, Mewati, and Dundhadi, or one more region, Hadoti, which is little bit more gifted in terms of water than other 4 regions because of Chambal. Only one perennial river flowing through Rajasthan, which is Chambal, through the south of Rajasthan. Now, there are many bodies. One is Kuan, which is well. So you dug a hole into the earth and you reach to a lowest depression point, which naturally has water. So water oozes out of that.
Right.
There are lakes and ponds. So Rajasthan has 3,000 water bodies.
Right.
Are man-made. Every village has a water body. Largely, if the name of a town or city or a village ends with Sar, S-A-R, that place is known after the water body in it, because Sar means Sarovar.
Right.
So Alsi Sar, Lunkaran Sar, Mahendra Sar, Padam Sar, all these Garsi Sar, they are all name of a town getting the name from a village water body in it. That's the ultimate respect, that I'm identified by water body in my place. Now the ultimate Sar is Amrit Sar.
Right.
The lake of nectar.
Right.
So that is one thing. Now coming to the types of water bodies that we have. There is one water body which you won't find anywhere else in India, is Kui.
Right.
To be a female version of Kuan, but it basically, these are dependent on the geology and topography of an area. So Kui you will find largely in the Shekhawati region, going all the way to Jaisalmer.
Yes.
They are dependent on something very unique, which is known as Rejani Pani. So there are 3 types of water that we identify in Rajasthan. One is Palar Pani, which is the water coming from heavens, rains. One is Patal Pani, which is water sinking into the underground aquifer, which is old water, Patal Pani. Then there is third one, which is Rejani Pani, which is neither here nor there. The water that is collected as humidity in now, why it is collected, why is not able to sort of sink into the underground aquifer? Reason is, in certain areas of Shekhawati, there is a layer of gypsum rock is passing through. Huge layer, like traveling to hundreds of kilometers, right? Couple of feet below the earth. Now, on top of it, you have sand. So when water falls on this region, it is not able to percolate into the underground aquifer. Spreads into the sand. Right? When it spreads into the sand, this water is not evaporated. It's not able to go down deep. So people have been able to figure out how to withdraw this water for their consumption purposes. What they have done is basically drop create a perpendicular cylinder kind of well, which is very little diameter, like maybe 5 feet diameter, something like that. And it's vertical, going down, right? To 40-50 feet, sometimes, right? Now what happens is, when you puncture the earth with this kind of a mechanism, you create a low pressure zone, right? And when you create a low pressure zone, whatever water is residing in the sand as humidity travels toward this area. Water will travel to low pressure zone, right?
Right.
And eventually humidity will convert into fresh water. So every morning, people can withdraw 10 to 12 buckets of fresh water.
You want to share your PPT while you speak about these?
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, please do that.
So we are looking at Kui.
Oh, so these are queens.
These are queens, right?
Okay.
So now you can see, very narrow kind of wells, right? And 40-50 feet deep into the earth, depending on the region. And these queens are generally private and public both. If they are, so even over here that you see is spread on a land, right?
Right.
They belong to a particular group or family or a particular caste or community. So queens belong to that. It is on a public land, but the village, the laws is that you can have a personal queen in a public area, right? But you don't own it. You only can withdraw water. Sometimes people have queen in their own home. That is a purely private.
Right? Are these connected to each other?
No, they are not connected to each other, but they are connected to the area. So there is water and there is a gypsum layer below it. right?
Okay.
So this brings it. Now sometimes the kui can be modified. Now you can see in the far background there is a water body,
Right.
right? So this water body recharges these kui all the time.
Okay.
So you can withdraw water from this water body, and you can also get fresh water, because this fresh water will have a higher quality or a better quality, because it's going to go through a couple of layer of sands to ooze into this well.
Right.
It will
Right.
be filtered already, right?
So, yeah, you can talk about one is this kui. In fact, this reminded me of a series of wells that I had seen in Burhanpur.
Okay.
You know, it's called, I'm forgetting the name, but it's a series of long wells connected to each other, which used to supply a spring water plus rain water to the whole of the city of Burhanpur, which was a ported city at some point in time. It's called something like kui only, and those wells look very similar to these kuis, but that's different technology because the topography is different.
Absolutely.
Of course, but it reminded me of that.
Yeah, quite possible. There are a lot of, like, sort of germination that has happened, technology coming from one side going to there. In
Right.
fact, in one of my walk, Nahargarh water walk, people see aqueduct. There are 2 aqueducts over there. Now the technology of aqueduct was developed by Romans in 1st century AD, right?
Right.
Technology via Middle East came to India, and it was utilized at Nahargarh Fort.
Right.
You can see the sort of culmination of 17th century, 1700 years into a water system, right? So nobody can lay claim to a technology,
Right. Right.
It's a communal technology evolved over centuries,
And it's tweaked around for your local needs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I can't, I can't stop myself from asking you about the beautiful step wells that we have in the western part of India. I mean, Rajasthan, Gujarat, you have these beautiful step wells, although I have seen them in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu as well, but not so frequently.
Is a different thing, particularly in the south. You won't see those step wells as embellished as in Gujarat or Rajasthan.
Yeah, well, some of them they're differently embellished.
Yeah.
They obviously showcase the local flavor of the embellishments, but some of the elements actually remain quite similar. But I'm going to ask you about Rajasthan and Gujarat Baudis, as they are called, Chand Baudi, Rani Ki Vav, Adlaj Vav.
Yeah.
So these step wells, do we have any idea of how they were constructed? Because what fascinates me is that they go many levels below the earth.
Yeah.
And they have continued to stay there for 800, 900,000 years, and they are still standing strong despite being in disuse and neglect and everything else. They have stood. And second, I have always wondered, why do they have those sideways steps? So if you have any logic behind that.
Let me bring the image of that step well so that
Yes.
you can see.
Yes. So you have these triangular steps going to go down. You'll have to move sideways down and then come to a platform, then take another sideways. So any reason for these sideways steps?
So how else would you go? This is like, you cannot go step down because it's very deep down, right?
Right.
And it will be difficult in terms of people walking down. They lose their concentration and coordination, orientation, right? So if you're going down and if you step sideways, the orientation doesn't change.
Okay.
Easy to go down, and that's the only way you can have steps which are going to be smaller. Otherwise, if you go straight down, you'll have to have bigger steps.
Basically, this is negotiating the depth of the step well.
Negotiating the depth as well as figuring out a better way to step down.
Okay.
And if you have one step going down, right, you have only few people going down. And in this way, multiple people can access the same water body.
Right.
There are many people who want to access it.
Right.
Well, you would notice there are going to be pulleys all around the well. 4 or 5 pulleys. Right. So that multiple time, at one time, many people can access the same thing.
Right.
And it also creates a beautiful, view.
Yeah. They are aesthetic marvels, engineering marvels, aesthetic marvels.
Absolutely.
So that brings me to another question. How is the water reflected in the culture of Rajasthan? You speak a lot about it.
Everything
Yes.
about
Yes.
our culture is lifestyle, textile, art, custom, tradition, food. Everything is rooted in water. So
Right.
for us, water is a celebration, right?
Right.
Now, towards your left, you would notice an image which is of Pushkar. Everything is around, hotels, dharamshala, education systems,
Right. Right.
sitting area, enjoyable, right? All our
Yes.
fairs and fairs happen around a water body,
Right.
right? You would see an image of pipes going right, left, and right everywhere, right? Now,
Right.
we have hidden our water in our walls,
Right.
taps. We don't see water because we have uh, water is no longer a kind of a living thing for us. It is
Mm-hmm.
a need.
Mm-hmm.
We need water to survive.
Right.
It's not present in our life as it was before. Now that is the one transition that has happened from the traditional cultures to modern culture, right?
Right.
I would not say, I would say the right image has benefits as well.
Right.
Water coming all the way to your tap has reduced the drudgery of women because the
Right.
responsibility of fetching water squarely falls on women's shoulder.
Right.
So that has reduced. That has allowed women to become more free and use their time differently, right? So
Right.
everything has their own benefit.
Right. Right. Right.
Now coming to the cultural aspects. Now you must have heard of Leheria, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
woman over here is enjoying a swing with her friend or a sister,
Right.
wearing Leheria. Towards right, you can say Leheria and Indigo. Now,
Mhm.
Leheria is a very specific tie and dye technique originated in
Right.
Pakistan. Leheria literally means wave like,
Right.
right?
Lehre.
Lehre. So it's location to flowing water. Now, in Rajasthan, we do not have flowing water, right?
Right.
So it's also a kind of a request to the gods, rain gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here, Leheria at the onset of monsoon on the festival of Teej.
Ah.
Right. So this is a request that comes so much,
Mm-hmm.
water starts to flow in our region and it create waves.
Wow. So
So
you replicate the flowing water on your textiles
exactly,
and expect the gods to look at it and actually make the water flow on your land.
absolutely.
Beautiful.
One.
Beautiful.
Second is that whatever we are lacking in nature, we are
Mm-hmm.
creating abundance in our living.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine thousands of women wearing leheria.
Right.
It can give you a kind of illusion that there is flowing water,
Ah,
right?
yes. Yes.
So that is also one aspect of it, and it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
So not only there are like women saris and salwar suits that are leheria, but there are also
Mm.
headgear for men, which is safa, right,
Right.
made of leheria, and this is usually worn during the time of Tej and during
Right.
monsoon. So this is leheria, right? Now this is a tie and dye technique, and tie and dye technique is basically tying a fabric at multiple regions
Right.
to keep it away from the coloring aspect. So it
Right.
gives you
Right.
kind of like this, right?
Right.
This is the area. Then dance forms. Now you must have noticed or witnessed in different parts of the country where events are happening from states.
Right.
This dance form is usually performed, right? By women.
Right.
Now you would notice in both forms. So these are two different dance forms. On
Mm-hmm.
the left is Bhavai,
Right.
and towards on the right is my right is Chari.
Right.
Where the multiple women are keeping one pot on their head,
Mm-hmm.
and the one images of a woman which have multiple pots on her head. Now all
Right.
these pots are made of terracotta. So if
Right.
you have a terracotta pots on your head and dance form, it's known as Bhavai.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused by the theatre dance form of Gujarat is Bhavai, which is different.
Right. Right.
Then to the women wearing keeping a sort of a copper pot on their head. Copper pot is known as chari in local language.
Okay.
That is cherry dance. Now, what is actually happening over here? They're trying to reflect or showcase their journey from their home to fetch water.
Oh.
Why these multiple pots? Because sometimes women may not have time.
Hmm.
The water source is far away. You cannot take multiple turns.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you're going to do instead is to balance couple of pots on your head.
Mm-hmm.
And after a couple of trials, you become master of it, and you're able to bring all the water that you need in one go.
Okay.
Now, why this dance form? Because imagine a woman walking down the street of a village, carrying multiple head pots on top of her head, right? She will not be able to look down. So she will not be able to see if there is a pebble,
Mm-hmm.
some kind of sharp nail on the. She'll have to feel them. and she'll have to walk very, very, like, slowly,
Carefully, yeah.
carefully. Now this whole thing is transferred into this dance form, which becomes very, very sensuous as well. One part
Yes.
of, but very, very beautiful.
Yes, I mean, I have seen this dance in very many cultural festivals, but I never related it to the fact that this could actually be replication of the water collection which the women in Rajasthan do on an everyday basis.
Exactly.
Which
Where
is
do you where
beautiful.
do you get a motivation or kind of idea from a lot of these things? And Rajasthan is a very celebratory culture where
Right,
a lot of these things are part of life.
right,
This is where it is, that it is coming from your daily ritual,
right,
right?
right, right.
So this is one. Then we have a music, and the name
Hmm.
itself is Panihari music,
Panihari music. Yeah, so
right? Now
that is
Paniharian are the women who go to well to fetch water. So any women,
right,
my mother, my grandmother, they will all be Paniharis at one point, right?
right.
And they would go. Now it's
Mhm.
dissimilar. I mean, I can relate it to a modern times when you are taking a kind of, I don't know, people who are connecting from Bombay. If you're taking a from Bombay Central to Karjat or Karar or Borivali, or from in Delhi from the Raji Chowk Metro all the way to Rohini, there is always going to be same people traveling together,
Right,
and they tend to form bond because they're doing
right,
the same trip every day. So they become
right,
travel buddies.
right,
And this is not different. So women from the community, so they know them all. There's a difference. It's a community is small. They know them from each other from before, from different occasions.
right,
All the women of a community, they go together. Now,
right.
during this journey, they share
Mhm.
their concerns, their frustrations of the day, their issues, all those things. Because
Mhm.
talk and you make yourself lighter, by talking.
Mhm.
So when you go this thing, and then they're wearing anklets and all those stuff. So when they're walking, there is a sound coming up. All this culminated into a music form.
Genre of music. Okay, I have
Genre of music
heard
was
this music. I have recorded this music, but I never connected it to the fact that it's the bunch of women going every day to fetch water and then creating music out of it. Great,
exactly
beautiful.
right. So this has come out of it, and when you have, so one of the more important stories or fables which is often repeated or sung by different music form is about a woman who has gone to fetch water. Then she notices there is a horseman, a
Mhm.
young man who's over there who's thirsty with his horse, right? So he requests the women for the water. The woman fetches the water, right?
Mhm.
And she's enamored by him, right?
Mm.
Now she doesn't even know that this same fellow is her fiance.
Right,
She has not seen her fiance.
right.
And she walks back to the home, and when she enters the home, she sees the same guy sitting over there. Now there are variations to this thing, but this particular aspect is encapsulated more beautifully in Panihari music,
Right,
right? But
right,
this is
right,
not a similar love story like Dhola Maru and all, but this is
right,
some
right.
sort of variation of it.
Okay,
So this
great.
is Panihari music, entirely different genre of music sung by
Right,
different artists and group forms,
right, right,
groups.
right, right, right.
Now innovation. Now you would notice this guy is cleaning his utensil using mud or sand.
Right,
We don't
right.
call mud, but sand. Now this is kind of a devolution of how the system is or was.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use sand. You use charcoal ash.
Right,
I have seen there used to women in our home who would come to clean other utensils in our home, and we would offer her. We have to keep like a pot full of charcoal ash for her,
right,
and that charcoal ash would come from burning while cooking food, burning wood from cooking food.
right,
This whole process was closed loop within the home. That wood,
right,
that charcoal coming from your home, coming to you cleaning utensil. Now,
right,
clean utensils using charcoal ash. One, there is no water, so you would
right.
obviously not use water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second is it's very scientific and very clean. Now, charcoal ash is carbon, pure carbon.
Right,
Carbon has the highest porosity
right,
as a property, right?
right.
Use that property to clean it. What do you do? Basically, you smear charcoal ash on top of a plate,
Mm-hmm.
right? What do you have on plate is oiliness from butter or oil or ghee, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will immediately absorb everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have eaten food on this, there is no other kind of dirt on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, once the oiliness is absorbed, the plate can be wiped clean using a cloth.
So waterless cleaning.
Waterless cleaning, right? Now, why charcoal ash and where do we use charcoal ash in the modern living? One, in your water filter.
Hmm.
Carbon candle in the water filter, which does
Right.
the job. It attracts all the impurity. It absorbs.
Right.
Porosity is used.
Right.
Further down, you use it in your toothpaste and in your face wash.
Right.
Same job, using porosity as a property to absorb filth or dirt that is on your face, right?
Right. Right.
So that is where it is used. And now, how do you continue using these things? Because it cannot remain scientific proposition. It has to become part of your living. So then it is converted into a tradition.
Hmm.
People who are using it may look down upon them, but they may also not know that what is the scientific reason. But it's a very clean way to clean your
Right.
hands.
Right, great. So that brings me back to your heritage walks. Tell us about your heritage walks that you conduct at two of the forts in Jaipur.
Right.
And what are the key highlight features? We don't want to take away your thunder because we want people to come and walk with you. But what are the key highlights of those walks?
So I have two walks. One is Nahargarh Water Walk and another is Amber Palace Water Walk. Now, what are the so I'll go back to why I thought of starting these walks. So it's somewhere in 2014, and I just moved back from US to sort of start living in Jaipur and in Rajasthan and do something in water. So I started my company called Rainwater, Research Advocacy and Innovation in Water, which does institutional level water management. On the side, I was also interested in about unearthing my own past, my own heritage. So I am a 17th generation Registani.
Okay.
I'm a desert person, and my past 16 generations have been living in desert, and they perished in desert as well.
Right.
So coming to Jaipur, and when I visited these places, Nahargarh water system, Amir water system, to build a gigantic water system to collect so much of water on top of a hill, which is 700 feet above Jaipur, it's mind blowing.
Right.
Not appreciated now, but it is mind blowing.
Yes.
So then I sort of started exploring them, and I realized that this demands a kind of attention which it has not been given before, and particularly when you come to Rajasthan, and Rajasthan is one of the most visited states.
Tourist destinations, yeah.
Right. What makes it so unique? Well, it is water. If there was water, no habitation, no culture, no civilization, and no Rajasthan.
Right.
So then I did a kind of a reverse journey and realized that maybe it calls for a kind of a trip, and then eventually it became a walk. Now, there are three components to the walk which I tend to, which is becoming a walk. It's a 2-hour long walk, right? And travel through the water structures which are living and 300 years on. They were built in 300 years before. Amer is far older than Nahargarh, because Nahargarh was built at the same time Jaipur was under construction. It is about Jaipur city, and it was built to protect Jaipur. Building a fort which is for army residing, you need to provide water. You cannot fetch water every day from ground below.
Right.
So provide systems on top of it. So these walks tell the story of the king who designed this, tell the story of the people who were living this, and also the system technologically. So there are three components to these walks: the heritage of Rajasthan, technological heritage of part of it, something I shared with you already. And now I didn't want it to make it a presentation. I wanted it to be an experiential thing where people enjoy. Whether they are interested in water or not, it is not my concern. Whoever is coming, my concern is they should enjoy and they should relate to a very core part of Rajasthan. So yes, the kings and their valor and the Rajputs and everything else, and everything is there. But a king would not survive without water.
Right.
Right. So the cultural heritage brings all these aspects, why we are who we are, right? We have designed some of the elements I've shared with you. Technological heritage, how these were constructed, what are the unique aspects of it? As I shared with you, there are products in water harvest, Nahargarh, right?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one or two things that your audience finds most fascinating. One or two things that you can tell our audience about.
It is impossible because I have been overwhelmed by the kind of response that I have received from people.
Okay.
They love it. They love the stories. They connect it well, right? They love the fact that water connects us all. So, coming from US.
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking. Do you see a sense of reverence coming for water, or appreciation at least coming for water after the walk?
Definitely. Like people who are not like people in India generally are aware. They may not much, but people coming from international people coming, they see water in different light.
Right.
And they are far more able to appreciate, not from the binary that, we need to conserve water more.
Right.
There are different facets to water.
Right.
That is where I think it comes to it, right?
Mhm.
For instance, Amer is a different kind of system, which is for a residence. Amer used to be a palace.
Right.
So the king would, his entourage would be living there, right? So there needs a
Right.
different kind of water, different kind of utility. Nahargarh is a fort. It
Right.
different kind of utility, right?
Right. Right.
There
Right.
are different utilities and different systems. And Rajasthan has many hill forts and all have water conservation, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Depending to the area.
Great. So anybody who's visiting Jaipur must connect with Neeraj and Heritage Water Walks. We are going to provide their contact details in the description so that you can reach out to them. And you must take their water walks. So Neeraj, let's spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about what are the other fascinating water-specific regions in India. I know Mandu is a big case study for water conservation. You know, a whole city which was the most densely populated city at some point in time, completely without any groundwater source and full of water, you know, full of luxury, water luxuries. That's one place I know. I know Kanheri Caves in Mumbai is another place where water was conserved beautifully. And I'm assuming that all hill forts had a mechanism because
Absolutely.
the army wouldn't have survived without water. But any other regions that you would want people to go out and explore, or you would want to go and explore from a water perspective?
See, my travel are always from water perspective.
Right,
Wherever I travel, I have this perspective in mind, whether or not I want. It's a
right,
kind of, imbibed in me. So Delhi is one city where you have tremendous water richness.
hmm,
It is Rajasthan also offers that mixing of Rajputi and Mughal culture. Delhi has
right,
far more Mughal culture, and it has
right.
multiple layer city. Haryana is another state where you will find a lot of these things, right? I think every city or every part region in India has lot of
Neat.
share in terms of water, because we are kind of a living tradition, and in terms of living tradition, a lot of our daily chores, daily aspects or customs, I have water at the base of it.
Yeah, you very rightly put. See, I live in Panji, which is a small island city surrounded by two rivers on two sides and a Arabian Sea on the third side. You know, it is surrounded. Even then, the origin of this city is in a spring. You know, the original part of the city came around a water spring that flows down from the hill. It comes, you know, even when it's a small little place surrounded by water all around, you know, perennial
Exactly.
rivers, this thing, but even then. So, yeah, it's fascinating. I totally agree with you that people, wherever they are living, you know, village, town, city, locality, they need to start exploring their own water heritage and hopefully share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something which is interesting. This is in terms of tourism perspective, this is something which India has to offer.
Yes,
That is the one reason I was sort of invited by the government of Rajasthan to develop these walks. That
right,
of all the states has more to offer in terms of, although it is a desert, I call
right.
Rajasthan as water civilization.
Right. It is. It is. It is. Great, Neeraj. Thank you so much for sharing your immense water knowledge with us. I hope there are at least a million Neerajas who come across this country and bring back the water civilization that we had, or at least the respect that we had for water come back. And of course, we need cleaner water. We need that's the base requirement for a good healthy living. So great, and we wish you all the best for your current as well as future water walks.
Thanks for having me here today, and I hope I will see you soon post this COVID thing, and I'll be personally able to take you walk through one of the walks. I will leave the audience with the video, which is of water flowing in the channels at Nahargarh Fort, which is
Mhm.
say that 300 years on without any care, this system
Okay,
is still working, and whenever it rains, it kicks in. So it doesn't
great.
require. This is the kind of what you call. And
So
you can
this
see
is
the water
what.
flowing in the channel.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, this kind of water channels can be seen around almost all fort cities.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. I mean, there's so much knowledge we have for the world to share.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay,
Thank you
so
so much.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Detours. You can also join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is InDetails, INDITALES. See you soon.